With recent interest rate increases initiated by Westpac last week, followed by Suncorp and Adelaide Bank, I thought we would go to Milson's Point at Rate City and have a chat with Nick Bendel to discuss what are some of the reasons why the costs of funding are increasing for lenders and how that's impacting borrowers. Hi, Kenya from Avvora, finance broker, and today we're going to have a quick chat with Nick Bendel from ratecity.com.au. So what we're wanting to, talk a little bit more, get some insights as to why some of the interest rate increases have been happening. There's been a lot of reference to cost of funding. So Nick, what are some of the items that you're seeing driving the cost for banks to actually pass on these costs and increase the interest rates for borrowers?
Well, Ken, as you say, interest rates have been going up. We've seen Suncorp make 2 increases this year in March and August. We've seen Westpac increase rates. We've seen Adelaide Bank increase rates. There have been some other lenders that have moved as well.
Yep.
And some people might be confused by that because the Reserve Bank hasn't increased the official cash rate, the official interest rate.
24 months it's been left unchanged or something like that?
Yeah, and it hasn't gone up since 2010. So there's probably some confusion out there as to why interest rates are going up.
Right, certainly. And what are some of the drivers that you're finding, or key factors that you're finding that's causing the increase in cost of funding for the lenders?
It's interesting you should mention cost of funding going up. That's one of the 2 main reasons why banks have been increasing interest rates. So one of them is that costs of funding have been going up over the past year or so, and beyond that, over the past few years, the profit margins of the banks have been going down. So if we combine those 2 things, profits going down, funding costs going up, that explains why the banks have been increasing interest rates over the past few months.
Certainly. And what are some of where are the banks, getting their funding from? Have there been changes in terms of the cost of where they're sourcing these fundings?
There has been a bit of a change. Part of where banks get their funding from is the deposits that we make in banks. So the money that we give to banks with our savings accounts and with our term deposits.
Sure.
But Australians, we're not very good savers, and we've actually been saving less money, which means that the banks have less of our money that they can lend out in home loans. And while we've been giving the banks less money, forcing them to look increasingly overseas, the cost of that overseas funding has actually been going up, partly because the Australian dollar has been going down and partly because American interest rates have been going up.
Right, certainly. That's an interesting factor because I guess the Avvora requires the banks to hold a certain amount of money in reserves, and savings certainly does impact that if there's not as much money in there and having to source the funding overseas.
Exactly. It's interesting you should mention Avvora, the banking regulator, Ken, because that leads on nicely to the other point about why the profit margins of banks have been going down over the past few years. So one of the reasons, as you mentioned, is that Avvora, the banking regulator, is forcing the banks to hold on to more capital. Banks like to get all their money and lend it out to homeowners because that's how they make their money. But the authorities are saying, no, you can't lend it all out now. You have to keep more of it in-house as a reserve. And that means the banks are making less money from their big stash of cash. And the other point I'd make, a lot of people don't realise there are more than 100 home loan lenders out there. So it's an intensely competitive market, and in the past few months, yes, banks have been increasing their interest rates. But before then, over the past few years, the rates were just going down, down and down.
It's certainly something I've seen, yes.
Exactly, and that's been eating up at the bank's profit margins, and so part of the reason they're raising interest rates now is in order to claw back a bit of that margin.
Certainly. All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for joining us and giving your insights into what's happening behind the scenes, because as borrowers we're kind of seeing the interest rates increase, so that information was very helpful. Thank you very much. That's Nick Bendel from ratecity.com.au.